right next to one of these symbols. It was actually another symbol on top of that one. So I changed my mind inside this cave-like structure under the tree. But anyway, so this is what I put up a camera there instead.
We look forward to scrutinising the police files to see what has actually been done, and more importantly, what can still be done.
When you lose a child, you can't eat, you can't sleep, and you definitely can't play tennis or go for a jog. That's just my opinion. But the point was that they were jogging on the hillside, and they made sure that everybody knew.
It is still a struggle for me to see beyond tomorrow. Every day I wake up hoping that this will be the day we find Madeleine. But having lived through 4 painful years without my dear daughter, I have reluctantly been forced to acknowledge that our quest could take weeks, months, or yet more years. And the reality is we have to ensure we have adequate funding.
The night before Madeleine McCann disappeared has always been overshadowed by what came after. But buried in witness statements, police files, and overlooked details lies a chilling truth, a warning, perhaps even a clue, that was spoken in the voice of a child just hours before she was gone. That evening, while the holidaymakers of the Ocean Club enjoyed their routine dinners and conversations, there was a subtle but unsettling moment within the McCann family's apartment. Madeleine, only 3 years old, reportedly made a remark that would later send shivers down the spines of investigators and parents alike. She had asked her mother, "Why didn't you come when we were crying last night?" It was a small, almost innocent statement, yet it hinted at something deeply troubling, that the children may have been distressed, calling out in the dark, while no adult came to their side. For many, this raised the possibility that someone had already been inside or near the apartment before the night of her disappearance. In the police files, this moment sits quietly, almost overlooked, yet it may hold extraordinary weight. A child's cry, ignored or unheard, could have been a subtle alarm that something was wrong. Had someone already tested the boundaries? Had an intruder entered the apartment earlier, gauging whether the children were alone and how often the parents checked? The remark carries the eerie suggestion that Madeleine had experienced fear before her final night. It's a detail that, once read, can never be forgotten because it may represent the only direct glimpse into what the children felt before the world came crashing down. On the morning of May 3rd, 2007, just before her disappearance, Madeleine reportedly asked her parents a haunting question. "Why didn't you come when me and Sean were crying last night?" Those words, fragile and innocent, carry the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. They are not just the casual musings of a 3-year-old. They are a window into something that might have already been unfolding. For investigators, this single statement has always stood out, not because of its simplicity, but because of the sinister implications behind it. If Madeleine and her younger brother Sean were indeed crying during the night, what caused it? Were they frightened by a noise outside the apartment, or perhaps by the presence of someone inside? Was it simply the fear of children left alone, or was it the first indication that another set of eyes had already been on them? The McCanns' routine of dining at the tapas bar while checking in periodically on the children is well documented. To outsiders, it may have looked predictable, a pattern that could be observed. If Madeleine's question reflects reality, then whoever was watching had more than one opportunity to test the safety of that apartment. A cry in the dark could have been the moment when an intruder pushed boundaries, seeing how quickly or slowly a parent might return. This question, almost lost in the flood of witness reports and media frenzy, might be the closest thing we have to Madeleine's own testimony. It is chilling because it lingers, unanswered. If she cried out once and no one came, what does that mean for the night she cried out for the last time? The McCanns had fallen into a routine. Dinner at the tapas restaurant with friends. Children left sleeping in the apartment just yards away. Parents walking back and forth to check in every half hour. A system of trust and a gap that a predator could exploit. But the real danger in routine is predictability. When a family turns a safety practice into a habit, it becomes measurable how long the adults are gone, how often they return, where the living room light is left, which windows are latched. To a would-be intruder, those rhythms are not comforting. They are a map. The half-hour checks, the soft laughter drifting from the restaurant, the knowledge that 3 small children were behind a locked door but not closely watched. Each detail constitutes a tiny opening. Investigators have long noted that patterns like this invite opportunists. They test them. They learn them. They wait for the moment with the fewest witnesses and the longest silence. So when we ask, was someone already inside that gap the night before, we are not asking merely whether an intruder stood in the doorway. We are asking whether an outsider had already measured that rhythm, entered the orbit of the Ocean Club's block of apartments, and used the McCanns' trust against them. Witness reports from that week describe strangers, vans, and men lingering near the complex. Other statements describe noises in the night and unexplained shadows. Taken together, they create a portrait of vulnerability, a place where routine became the very thing that made a crime possible. Investigators wrestling with this question have had to separate what's plausible from what's provable. A predator who knows your pattern doesn't leave traces that fit neatly into a file. They leave opportunities. The chilling possibility is that the night Madeleine later vanished may not have been the first test of that gap. It may have been the final, successful experiment. If so, the night before was not merely a prelude. It was a moment someone discovered how wide the gap really was. In the days before Madeleine vanished, witnesses reported strange men knocking on doors, claiming to be charity collectors. Others described individuals loitering near the McCann's apartment. These were not just idle observations. They were logged in police files, repeating patterns that suggested someone was scouting the area. Families on holiday recall being unsettled by men who seem out of place, watching rather than participating in the relaxed atmosphere of Praia da Luz. Police records go further, confirming there had been burglaries in the surrounding neighborhood during that period, a clear indication that opportunists were active, probing for weaknesses in holiday apartments left unattended. And yet, the most unsettling detail comes back to the small bedroom where Madeleine slept. According to Kate McCann, when she walked in just after 10 p.m. on May 3rd, she found the window open and the shutter raised. It was a shocking sight, a mother's instant realization that her child was gone. But the question that has gnawed at investigators ever since is whether this was the first time that window and shutter had been disturbed. Could they have been tested earlier, perhaps even the night before, when Madeleine and Sean cried out in the dark? A tampered shutter may not scream for attention. It whispers. A loosened catch, a faint mark, a sound muffled by the wind. Easy to overlook until tragedy makes those details sinister. If someone had already practiced entering that room, gauging how quickly the children stirred or how visible the movement was from outside, then Madeleine's final night wasn't random. It was rehearsed. That window may not just mark the point of disappearance. It may be the silent witness to the night before, when a predator crossed the line from planning to action. Police response that night would later be criticized as slow, chaotic, and careless. Local officers arrived without urgency, critical areas weren't sealed, and neighbors and resort staff were allowed to wander in and out of the apartment. Valuable time and evidence slipped away in those crucial early hours. But even before May 3rd, the McCann's own child may have been sounding an alarm. Madeleine's haunting words about crying the previous night are more than a sad anecdote. They echo like an unheeded siren. To investigators who later pieced together the timeline, that cries symbolize a break in the ordinary. Children cry for many reasons: night maze, discomfort, separation anxiety. Yet the weight of her question, "Why didn't you come when me and Sean were crying last night?" suggests fear that lingered long enough for her to remember and repeat it the next morning. That is not a fleeting whimper lost in sleep. It is a cry etched into a child's memory. If we take her words seriously, then the cries may have been triggered by something external, a shadow moving in the room, the rattle of shutter, or even the silent presence of someone testing entry. For investigators, this transforms a narrative. Madeleine's voice becomes evidence, her innocence turned into the earliest recorded signal of intrusion. And that is what chills most of all. Before the chaos, before the search dogs, before the world's headlines, a child may have already tried to tell the story. Madeleine's cry was not just the cry of a child. It may have been the sound of a door opening, a hand reaching, and a predator rehearsing the unthinkable. Think about it. A nearly 4-year-old wakes frightened, tells her parents the next morning that she cried, and hours later, she vanishes. That sequence of moments rips through the idea of coincidence and invites a darker reading of what unfolded in Praia da Luz. Children do cry, and often for harmless reasons. Bad dreams, a tooth, the separation that comes with bedtime. But when a child remembers and voices its fear the next morning, it becomes a trace, a psychological footprint left by an experience that mattered enough to be recalled. Madeleine's remembered crying is not a stray detail to be filed away. It is a timestamp, a narrow window that marks when the ordinary world first fractured for her. Investigators trained to read those fragments see them as potential signals, the precise moment someone or something cut into the family's bubble of safety. So we ask the questions that haunt every detective's notebook. Did someone try the shutters the night before, testing whether the room was locked and whether the inhabitants would stir? Did a silhouette pause under the window, or did a van slow and idle near the block while a man watched the lights go down? If Madeleine felt watched, if she woke and cried because a shadow passed beside her cot or a sound scraped against a window, then her later disappearance isn't a spontaneous theft. It's a culmination of a sequence that began with reconnaissance, with quiet tests and patient waiting. The observer becomes a predator only when they learn the rhythms of routine. Half-hour checks, the dim path between Tapper's bar and apartment, the soft lullabies that lull adults into complacency. The world remembers the night she disappeared because at night is where loss becomes public. But the true story may have begun earlier, in the small act that never make headlines, a knock, a rustle, an unremarked question from a child. Those small acts, when strung together, map a decision. Tonight is the night to act. Madeleine's cry, then, is not simply an anecdote. It is potentially the first alarm, faint, ignored, and impossibly consequential.